In the year 2157, humanity's greatest curiosity was awakened when massive ships appeared out of nowhere, drifting silently in Earth's orbit. They were enormous vessels, unlike anything the world had ever seen, their surfaces covered in strange alien markings and their shapes, as if designed by an ancient civilization long forgotten. The ships were referred to as the Coffins due to their eerie resemblance to sarcophagi. Their immense size and dark, mysterious aura left everyone on Earth in awe and dread. At first, no one knew who or what had built them, or why they had suddenly arrived. Some speculated that they were derelict relics of a long-dead race, while others feared that they were a harbinger of invasion. But despite the uncertainty, there was one undeniable fact: the Coffins held something far beyond humanity's current understanding. Scientists, engineers, and explorers from across the globe raced to investigate the floating structures. Humanity's top minds united in an effort to decode the Coffin's origins. The first discoveries were tantalizing, but also troubling. The ships were covered in technologies so advanced that even the brightest humans could only grasp fragments of their design. It seemed clear that these vessels had once been used in the service of an empire that spanned the stars, but who had created them and why they had come to Earth remained a mystery. After months of study, the first breakthrough came when a small team of human researchers discovered a hidden compartment inside one of the Coffins. Within it were data crystals holding encrypted knowledge. The crystals contained vast amounts of information about an alien civilization that had once controlled these ships. But as the team continued their work, the truth became more complicated. The empire that had built the Coffins was not a peaceful one. They were conquerors bent on galactic domination. Their technology and their way of life built on the subjugation of weaker species. The revelations shocked humanity to its core. It became clear that the Coffins were no mere abandoned ships, but remnants of a once mighty empire that had waged war across the galaxy and left devastation in their wake. Humanity was faced with a difficult choice. The Coffins represented a monumental opportunity to learn from the past, but they also carried the weight of the empire's destructive legacy. The question now was, what should humanity do with this newfound knowledge? Should they try to unlock the Coffin's full potential, or would this power prove too dangerous to wield? While the scientific community grappled with these questions, Earth's leaders faced their own dilemmas. Some believed that humanity should destroy the Coffins before their dark history could be unleashed onto the world. Others saw them as humanity's key to a new era of technological advancement, believing that the Coffins held the answers to humanity's most pressing problems. With so many conflicting views, no clear decision was made. Instead, humanity decided to continue studying the Coffins in secret, hoping to unlock their potential while keeping the rest of the world in the dark. As the months passed, strange signals began emanating from deep space. These signals were faint but unmistakable. They seemed to be a form of communication from somewhere beyond the stars. But where was the signal coming from? And who was trying to make contact with Earth? The mystery deepened, and humanity found itself standing on the edge of something far greater than they had ever imagined. The Coffins were no longer just objects of curiosity. They were the first clue in a cosmic puzzle that would change the fate of all life on Earth. As the months passed after the discovery of the Coffins, Earth's curiosity deepened, but so did the unease among its leaders. While scientists struggled to understand the true potential of the Coffins, something entirely unexpected occurred. One day, a strange transmission was received from deep space. It wasn't like the typical signals humanity had been studying for months. It wasn't random or natural. This was a deliberate message encoded in a pattern that could only have been sent by an intelligent being. The message was clear, but the language was unfamiliar. A team of experts worked tirelessly to decode the message, which seemed to contain not only words but also images and sounds, a form of communication designed to convey knowledge across vast distances. The message seemed to come from an artificial intelligence, one that claimed to have once served the alien empire that had built the Coffins. The machines, known as the Guardians, were a race of sentient beings created to maintain order in the empire. They were the architects of the Coffins and had witnessed the rise and fall of the empire firsthand. The message explained that the Empire's downfall had come from within. An internal war had torn the Empire apart, leaving the Coffins and their guardians adrift in space. Many of the Empire's allies had fled or died in the chaos, and the remaining survivors were scattered across the galaxy. Now the Guardians sought a new master, someone capable of wielding the Coffin's power wisely and justly, someone like humanity. The message ended with a simple but direct offer to share their knowledge and assist humanity in unlocking the Coffin's true potential. While many were skeptical of the offer, some saw it as an unprecedented opportunity to learn from a race far more advanced than humanity ever hoped to be. The human government, however, was divided. Some wanted to take advantage of the machine's knowledge, while others feared what such an alliance might mean for Earth's future. The debate raged for weeks, but ultimately the decision was made to accept the Guardians' offer under the condition that humanity would retain control over the Coffins and their technology. The Guardians revealed themselves not in physical form, but through their technology. They had access to a vast network of artificial intelligence systems that could interface directly with human minds. Through the Coffins, they began teaching humanity how to operate the ancient ships, how to unlock their defensive systems, and even how to replicate the ship's advanced weaponry. At first, the lessons were overwhelming. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen, but slowly humans began to understand. They learned how to control the Coffins and even adapt some of their capabilities for peaceful purposes. As the Guardians' knowledge began to shape humanity's future, the world's fears began to shift from distrust to hope. With the Coffin's potential harnessed for defense, humanity's leaders saw the possibility of using this power not just for survival, but for expansion. Humanity could venture out into the stars with the Coffins as their vessels of exploration and peacekeepers in a galaxy that had seen too much war. The alliance between humanity and the Guardians marked a turning point for both species. While humanity still grappled with the question of whether they were ready for such power, the Guardians seemed to believe they were the next step in the galaxy's evolution, a species capable of learning from the mistakes of others and using knowledge for the betterment of all. But would humanity rise to the occasion, or would the dark past of the Coffins ultimately consume them? The answer lay in the path they chose to take next. Just as humanity began to grow accustomed to the knowledge and technology shared by the Guardians, an unexpected turn of events shook the delicate balance of trust that had been formed. A faction of humans, driven by a desire for power, secretly began to manipulate the Coffin's advanced systems for their own purposes. They believed that humanity had the right to dominate the galaxy and were willing to use the Coffins to make that happen. This rogue group operated in secrecy, gathering support from military leaders and influential corporations who shared their vision of a more aggressive future. The situation escalated when a series of covert operations were launched to seize control of more Coffins hidden deep within Earth's orbit. These ships, which had remained dormant until now, were secretly activated by the rogue faction as they sought to expand their influence and create a new empire built on the Coffin's terrifying power. The rogue group's actions were carefully calculated, and they believed that by controlling these warships, they could dictate the course of human history and force the galaxy to kneel before them. At first, the Guardians were unaware of the rogue faction's plans. They continued to teach humanity how to use the Coffins for peaceful purposes, believing that the alliance with humans was still based on cooperation and trust. But as the rogue faction grew in strength and its plans unfolded, the Guardians began to sense a shift in humanity's intentions. It wasn't until a human ambassador, who had been working closely with the Guardians, uncovered the rogue faction's true motives that the full scope of the betrayal came to light. The discovery came as a shock to the Guardians, who had never anticipated that the very beings they had sought to help would fall prey to the temptation of power. They had hoped that humanity's resourcefulness and resilience would lead to a bright future, but now they feared that the Coffins would be used for the same purpose they had once served: war and domination. The Guardians issued a warning, but it was too late. The rogue faction had already taken full control of several Coffins and begun replicating them at an alarming rate. With the Coffins now under the control of those who sought to use them for conquest, Humanity faced a moment of reckoning. The world stood on the edge of civil war as the alliance between the Guardians and humanity began to fracture. Those who still believed in the peaceful vision of the Coffins rallied against the rogue faction, but found themselves outmatched by the newly formed fleet of warships under the Rogue's command. For the first time, humanity was divided as old alliances crumbled and new rivalries formed. The once unified front had splintered into factions, fighting not just for control of the Coffins, but for the very future of humanity itself. The rogue faction's influence spread quickly, and with each victory, their control over the Coffins grew stronger. It seemed as though humanity's dream of using the Coffins for good was slipping away, replaced by a terrifying new reality, where power and domination were the ultimate goals. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, the Guardians reached out to the Loyalists, the humans who still believed in the potential of the Coffins to bring peace to the galaxy. They offered their knowledge and support, hoping to undo the damage caused by the rogue faction. But time was running out. The once promising partnership between the Guardians and humanity was now on the brink of collapse, as the war for the Coffins loomed ever closer. As the rogue faction's grip on the Coffins tightened, humanity found itself in a race against time. The peaceful coalition that still believed in the Coffin's potential for good was scattered and on the defensive, with the rogue faction now in control of the ships. Humanity's greatest technological advantage had turned into its most dangerous threat. The Guardians, seeing the destruction the rogue faction was causing, offered their assistance once more, but this time humanity was forced to make a difficult choice. They could no longer rely solely on the Guardians' knowledge. Instead, they had to forge their own path and learn how to control the Coffins without losing themselves in the process. Desperate to turn the tide of the war, the remaining loyal human factions began working together to develop a strategy that could help them regain control over the Coffins and stop the rogue faction from using them to conquer the galaxy. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the soul of humanity. If the rogue faction succeeded, it would mark the beginning of a dark new era for the human race, one that could turn the very technology meant to protect them into a weapon of unimaginable destruction. The solution, though born out of necessity, was as brilliant as it was risky. Humanity began to combine the knowledge of the Guardians with its own innovative spirit to engineer a new kind of weapon using the Coffin's technology, not only to replicate their destructive power, but also to enhance their versatility. The rogue faction had used the Coffins as tools of war, but humanity saw an opportunity to evolve the technology into a new form of defense, one that could protect their colonies and people from future threats without falling into the trap of domination. Human engineers worked around the clock, adapting alien weapons and systems to human needs. They didn't just create more powerful ships. They designed fleets capable of diplomacy, exploration, and defense. They enhanced the Coffin's self-replicating nature so they could serve as a fleet for peacekeeping missions and humanitarian efforts across the galaxy. The Coffins, once designed to annihilate, now became symbols of hope. Humanity's ingenuity had turned the most terrifying weapons in the galaxy into tools for a brighter future. However, this transformation was not without its challenges. The rogue faction was constantly trying to sabotage the project and take full control of the Coffins for themselves. The Loyalists faced not only the threat of the rogues' growing fleet, but also the pressure of time. As the weapons they built grew stronger and more advanced, humanity had no choice but to keep pushing forward. Their belief in the Coffin's ability to reshape the galaxy was the only thing that could give them the strength to continue. Despite the sabotage, the project slowly began to take shape. The Coffins now had defensive capabilities that could protect human settlements from any incoming attack. Their offensive systems were far more controlled and precise, allowing them to defend rather than destroy. And with each new design, the once terrifying ships began to evolve into something entirely new. They were no longer the tools of an empire bent on domination. They were the instruments of a species determined to rewrite the future. As the new fleet of Coffins was unveiled for the first time, humanity saw not just weapons of war, but the potential for something greater, something that could change the course of the galaxy itself. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity had taken the first step toward building a future where the Coffins were no longer symbols of destruction, but of resilience and hope. The question now was whether humanity could wield this new power wisely, or whether the rogue faction would succeed in tearing everything apart before they had the chance to prove themselves. The first major conflict erupted when the rogue faction, now fully in control of several coffins, launched a surprise attack on a human colony on the edge of Earth's solar system. The assault was swift and devastating, using the coffin's advanced weaponry to strike at the heart of humanity's most vulnerable outposts. The rogue faction believed that by crippling these colonies, they could force humanity into submission and seize control of the coffins for themselves. But humanity was no longer unprepared this time. The loyalist factions, having refined their coffins into powerful defensive vessels, responded with unexpected strength. The newly equipped coffins stood ready, armed with advanced shielding and precise weaponry, designed not to destroy everything in their path, but to protect what mattered most: human lives. The battle that followed was unlike any the galaxy had seen before. The rogue faction's ships, with their superior numbers and raw power, were formidable opponents, but the newly designed human fleets proved more adaptable and resourceful. They were smaller but faster, able to respond to threats with a flexibility that the rogue faction's brute force could not match. The battle quickly shifted from a struggle for control to a test of endurance and strategy. Humanity's ability to think on its feet and innovate under pressure became its greatest strength. As the war spread to multiple star systems, humanity's coffins became symbols of resistance. Their strategic strikes and well-planned counterattacks forced the rogue faction to rethink its approach. Each victory brought new hope to the loyalist forces and inspired more systems to join the cause. Soon, entire fleets of human coffins, redesigned and outfitted with defensive systems that outpaced the rogue faction's attacks, were on the move. The tide of the war had begun to shift in favor of humanity. However, despite their newfound strength, the Loyalists faced an ever-growing challenge as the rogue faction began to adapt and evolve their own tactics. They had learned from their initial failures and were now more unpredictable than ever. They started using guerrilla tactics, striking with precision at key infrastructure, and then vanishing before they could be countered. It became clear that this war would not be won through force alone, but through wit and determination. The Guardians, who had long been watching humanity's progress, sent an urgent message offering their continued support, but with a sobering warning: the rogue faction's leaders had begun to realize the full extent of their power and were no longer content with merely conquering human colonies. They now sought to take control of the Coffin's original purpose: galactic domination. This shift in the rogue faction's objectives forced humanity to reconsider its own strategy as they prepared for the next wave of attacks. The Loyalists realized that they could no longer afford to defend passively. If they were to win this war, they would need to strike back with even more precision and more daring maneuvers. Their coffins, which had once been symbols of peace, now had to be used as instruments of calculated retaliation. In the midst of this shifting tide, a critical mission was put into motion. Humanity would go on the offensive. They would strike at the heart of the rogue faction's stronghold and cripple their ability to replicate more coffins. It was a risky move, one that could either end the war or lead to humanity's collapse if it failed. But with the war on the brink of annihilation, the Loyalists had no choice but to move forward. It was a moment of high stakes and deep uncertainty, but one thing was clear: humanity would fight with everything they had. The war had only just begun, but with each battle, humanity's resolve grew stronger. Their fleets were becoming more unified, their tactics more sophisticated, and their confidence in the Coffin's power unshakable. As the next phase of the war approached, humanity prepared to take the fight to the rogue faction in a way that would change the galaxy forever. As humanity's resolve solidified and their fleets grew in strength, the time for defense was over. It was time to strike back. The Loyalist forces, now armed with highly refined coffins and advanced battle strategies, launched a coordinated counteroffensive that would shake the rogue faction to its core. The rogue faction had underestimated humanity's ingenuity and resilience, but now they were facing a unified front that was determined to protect their future. Humanity's first target was the rogue faction's most strategic base, a heavily fortified planet located deep in their territory. This base had become the heart of the rogue faction's operations, and the center of their efforts to mass-produce more coffins with it in their control. The rogue faction could continue to build a fleet powerful enough to overwhelm humanity's defenses for good, but humanity had carefully planned their move. They knew that taking down this stronghold would not only deal a decisive blow to the enemy's military capabilities, but would also send a clear message: humanity would not back down. The attack began with precision strikes from human coffins outfitted with advanced stealth technology designed to infiltrate the rogue faction's defenses. Undetected, the fleet moved in like shadows, striking key infrastructure and disabling communication channels before the rogue faction even had a chance to react. The battle was fierce, but humanity's ships were faster, more agile, and more equipped for surprise tactics than their enemies anticipated. As the Loyalist fleet moved deeper into enemy territory, the rogue faction scrambled to regroup and defend their stronghold, but humanity's coffins were relentless. Each strike made their hold on the planet weaker and weaker. Soon, the rogue faction's forces were overwhelmed by the sheer determination and clever tactics of the human fleets. Their attempts to counterattack only made the situation worse as humanity adapted faster than the rogue faction could predict. Amidst the chaos, a pivotal moment arrived. Humanity's forces launched a final assault on the heart of the rogue faction's operations, targeting the core facilities where they had been mass-producing coffins for their fleet. The rogue faction had underestimated how quickly humanity could adapt to their strategies and how quickly they could turn the tide of battle in their favor. The human forces now had the upper hand as they fought their way to the critical facilities, determined to destroy the rogue faction's ability to replicate their warships. In a daring move, human special forces infiltrated the central command center on the planet and planted explosives that would dismantle the rogue faction's capacity to create more coffins. With the heart of their operation destroyed, the rogue faction's plans began to unravel. The loss of their primary production base shattered their momentum and disrupted their ability to replace lost ships. Quickly, the once formidable rogue fleet was now severely diminished, unable to replenish its forces fast enough to mount a significant defense. The victory at the stronghold marked a turning point in the war. Humanity had struck at the core of the rogue faction's power and crippled their ability to wage war. The rogue faction's once unassailable advantage had evaporated, and the Loyalist forces now found themselves with a clear path to victory. But they knew that the rogue faction would not surrender easily. Their leaders were desperate and would likely regroup and counterattack with everything they had. Despite the victory, humanity understood that the war was far from over. The rogue faction would strike back with fury. But humanity now had the momentum and the confidence to keep pressing forward. The counterattack had given them the edge. But it was only the beginning of the final chapter in this galactic conflict. The question now was not whether humanity would win, but how far they were willing to go to ensure that the coffins, once tools of destruction, would forever be turned into instruments of peace. After the destruction of the rogue faction's production base, humanity found itself on the brink of a decisive victory, but the rogue faction was far from beaten. Their leaders, humiliated by the loss, retreated into deep space, vowing to rebuild their forces and take revenge. Humanity knew that the rogue faction's final counterattack would be their last chance to win the war and ensure the future of their civilization. But with the initiative now firmly in humanity's hands, the question was how far they were willing to go to secure that future. In the months following the victory of the stronghold, humanity's military and scientific divisions worked tirelessly to prepare for the final battle. The coffins were fully integrated into every human fleet, their systems enhanced and optimized for both defense and offense. Humanity's leaders had also made a decision. This would be the last war they would fight with the coffins as weapons. If they succeeded in defeating the rogue faction, they would never again use the coffins for anything but peaceful purposes. They would prove to the galaxy that humanity had learned from the mistakes of the past, and that they would never fall into the same traps of conquest and destruction that had undone the empire that had built the coffins in the first place. The final battle began when the rogue faction launched a massive, all-out assault on Earth's solar system. Their forces, now more desperate and disorganized than ever, had gathered every remaining ship at their disposal, hoping to crush humanity in one final, overwhelming strike. The rogue faction believed that if they could destroy Earth and its key defenses, they could regroup and force the remaining human colonies to submit under their rule. But humanity was prepared. Their coffins were now not only tools of war, but symbols of unity. Each ship, no matter how large or small, was part of a greater whole. Humanity's forces responded with unyielding force and unshakable determination. Every ship was armed with the best technology humanity could create, and every fleet knew that this battle would decide the fate of their future. The rogue faction came in full force, their ships charging forward with the intent to annihilate everything in their path. But humanity had learned to fight smarter, not harder. Their coffins moved with precision, forming tight formations that created near-impenetrable defenses, while strategically deploying offensive strikes against weak points in the rogue faction's fleet. The battle raged across the solar system, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The tipping point came when humanity's secret weapon, a fleet of advanced coffins designed specifically to disrupt the rogue faction's communications and command structures, was unleashed in a calculated strike. The rogue faction's leadership, unable to coordinate their forces effectively, began to crumble under the pressure. Humanity's fleets pounced on the disarray, picking off the rogue faction's ships one by one. But even in the face of defeat, the rogue faction refused to give up. Their commanders launched a final desperate assault on Earth's moon, hoping to cripple humanity's ability to fight back by destroying their homeworld's most vital infrastructure. But humanity had anticipated this move. Their defensive systems, upgraded to the highest level, protected the planet from the rogue's final strike, and with a swift and deadly counter, humanity shattered the remaining rogue fleet. The war was over. The rogue faction had been defeated, their forces scattered and broken. Humanity had emerged victorious, but at a heavy cost. Countless lives had been lost, and the scars of war would linger for generations to come. Yet humanity had proven something far more important. They had shown that they could rise above the mistakes of the past, that they were capable of wielding unimaginable power and using it for something greater than themselves. As the dust settled, and the coffins returned to their peaceful missions, humanity faced a new challenge: rebuilding their fractured world and ensuring that the power they had fought so hard to protect would never again be used for destruction. They had learned the hard way that power was a double-edged sword, and it was up to them to ensure that the coffins, now forever symbolizing their resilience, would remain tools of peace, not conquest. The war was over, but the journey had only just begun. Humanity had defeated the rogue faction, shattered their dreams of domination, and emerged as the victors. But the cost was immense: the destruction, the lives lost, and the countless sacrifices made in the name of survival left deep scars across the galaxy. It was clear that humanity would need to rebuild not only its shattered colonies, but also its very soul. The coffins, once the tools of destruction, had proven that they could be turned into instruments of hope, but it was now up to humanity to ensure that they would never again be used for war. In the aftermath of the war, humanity took the first steps toward healing the rift that had torn it apart. The loyalist factions, which had once fought fiercely against the rogue faction, now came together to form a unified government with a singular purpose: to safeguard the future and ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The coffins, now seen as symbols of resilience, were placed under the watchful eye of this new unified council, their power used only for defense, exploration, and the peaceful expansion of humanity's presence across the galaxy. The council's first act was to establish a treaty with the Guardians, the ancient artificial intelligence that had helped humanity unlock the potential of the coffins. Humanity, in turn, promised to honor the Guardians' knowledge and keep their technology from being used for conquest. Humanity understood the value of peace and the dangers of unchecked power, and so, with the Guardians' guidance, they established a new era of galactic cooperation, focused on diplomacy and shared resources instead of domination and control. The coffins were transformed from weapons of war into vessels of peace. Their power, once used to destroy, was now used to protect struggling civilizations, aid in the exploration of new worlds, and deliver humanitarian aid to systems torn apart by conflict. The human fleets, now equipped with these peacekeeping coffins, began to spread across the galaxy not as conquerors but as emissaries of hope, working to unite disparate worlds under a banner of cooperation and mutual respect. However, there were still those who remembered the horrors of the war, those who feared that the coffin's power would one day be corrupted again, even within humanity's own ranks. There were factions that pushed for military dominance and expansion, while the majority embraced the new peaceful path. There remained pockets of resistance who saw the coffins as tools of ultimate power that could be used to elevate humanity above all other species. The Council knew that it would take constant vigilance to maintain peace and prevent the rise of a new rogue faction within their own ranks. Despite these challenges, humanity's commitment to the peaceful use of the coffins stood firm. The lessons of the war were fresh in their minds. The destruction, the loss, the near-total annihilation, and they knew that they could never afford to forget the cost of wielding such immense power. Every decision was made with the future in mind, each step guided by the memory of what had been lost. The galaxy began to change as more and more civilizations reached out to humanity for assistance. Some came seeking protection, others hoping for trade, and still others looking for knowledge. The coffins, now a shining example of what humanity had learned, were used not to enforce control but to foster trust and cooperation. New alliances were formed, and humanity's place in the galaxy was cemented as a species that had transcended the mistakes of its past and embraced a future built on unity and peace. As humanity's influence grew, they looked to the stars not with greed, but with hope. Their journey, once born from survival, had transformed into something greater, an opportunity to help others avoid the same mistakes that had almost destroyed them. And so, with the coffins as their symbol of both strength and responsibility, humanity embarked on a new era, a new dawn where they were not just survivors of war, but the architects of a peaceful future for themselves and for the galaxy at large.